Welcome to reading you to sleep once again. We are going to read Once Upon a Story. We are going to start with A Castle in the Air by Arthur Scott Bailey. Autumn had come, and Farmer Green shocked the corn. All over the field, bundles of corn stalks stood in rows like soldiers. And what suited Master Meadow Mouse especially was the ripe ears in the shocks which Farmer Green had not yet gathered. For some weeks, Master Meadow Mouse had been living in a rude shelter, which he had built for himself near the fence between the pasture and the meadow. Though he had been quite comfortable there during the hot weather, there were days now when a chilly wind swept through Pleasant Valley and made him shiver slightly as he thought of the frost which his neighbors told him were on the way. He had made up his mind to seek some snugger home, but not until he saw what Farmer Green was doing with the corn stalks did he decide on his new dwelling. "What a fine idea of Farmer Green's," he cried, when he first looked upon the shocked corn. "I never dreamed that he had been raising corn to make homes for our family." He changed his opinion of Farmer Green. Master Meadow Mouse had been much upset when Farmer Green cut the grass in the meadow at haying time. All the birds in the air could see him whenever he crossed the bare field. Now, however, he forgot his displeasure in the joy that Farmer Green's latest move gave him. That night, Master Meadow Mouse crept into the cornfield. The round yellow harvest moon shone down on the field, bathing the shocks of corn in a flood of light and making the pumpkins that lay on every side look almost as golden as they appeared under the midday sun. Master Meadow Mouse was surprised to find that many of his cousins had the same happy thought about moving that had come to him. He met dozens of big Meadow Mouse family that night, and every one of them was intent on picking out a shock of corn to live in. Luckily, there were shocks enough for all, and no disputes arose. Some wanted to settle near the fence. Some preferred to live in the middle of the field. Many decided to make their new homes near Broad Brook so they could enjoy a swim now and then without having to travel far to get to the water. Master Meadow Mouse was one of the best swimmers. He found a huge shock that stood near the bank of the brook. Crawling through it, he discovered at least 2 dozen ears of ripe corn there. "I won't look any further," he exclaimed. "Here's food enough to last for months, all stored for me and ready to be eaten whenever I'm hungry." Then he set to work, and high in the top of the shock he made himself a nest of dry husks, which he stripped off some of the ears. It was an easy matter to build that home. Everything that he needed was right at hand, and in no time at all, Master Meadow Mouse had his house in order. Then he was ready for a nap. But first he made a hearty meal of corn because, as he said, he always slept much better on a full stomach. Me too. As he settled himself at last in his new quarters, just before he dozed off, Master Meadow Mouse murmured happily to himself. "I never thought," he said, "that I'd sleep in a castle in the air." Life had become very easy for Master Meadow Mouse. Master Meadow Mouse. He didn't even have to leave home to get all the corn he could eat. He simply crept out of his nest, and right there in his corn shock he had 24 ears of ripe corn. He didn't need to set foot to the ground unless he wanted a drink. Of course, Master Meadow Mouse wasn't content to stay at home morning, noon, and night. He scampered away whenever he pleased. Sometimes he went for a swim in Broad Brook. Sometimes he visited his cousins, who dwelt in other shocks in the cornfield. And every night he joined the big Meadow Mouse family in a frolic. They chased one another around the pumpkins that strewed the ground, dodged behind the shocked corn, or ran along the rail fence. During the daytime, Master Meadow Mouse and his companions lay low. When they went abroad, they kept a close watch for Mr. Crow. Whenever Mr. Crow visited the cornfield, the Meadow Mouse family hastened to hide. They didn't try to go to their own homes, but plunged inside the nearest shocks of corn. Mr. Crow was far from foolish. He knew what was taking place right underneath his nose or his beak. Flapping forward the cornfield from the woods, he could see a great scurrying of small reddish-brown persons. But when he settled down in the field, there was never a meadow mouse anywhere in sight. "They're stealing corn," the old gentleman spluttered. "I'd stop them if I could, but what can I do when they hide the moment they see me coming?" The old fellow pondered over the question. "Somebody," he said, "will have to tear these shocks apart in order to catch the Meadow Mouse family, and I don't know anyone that could do it better than Rascal Coon." Little did Mr. Crow know that Rascal Coon was already planning to visit the cornfield as soon as it grew dark. Nor did Master Meadow Mouse and his cousins guess that they were to have an unwelcome guest that night. As usual, after dark, they poured out their castles to enjoy their nightly frolic when the word went around, "Hide!" For somebody squeaked in a frightened voice, "Rascal Coon is crawling through the pasture fence." The Meadow Mouse party in the cornfield suddenly vanished. Not one of the merrymakers lingered an instant after hearing that Rascal Coon was entering the field. And since Master Meadow Mouse happened to be near the shock where he lived, he ran up it in a twinkling and crept inside to curl up in his nest and try to catch 40 winks. Rascal Coon wrenched an ear of corn from the shock where Master Meadow Mouse lived. He paused and cocked an ear toward the top of the shock. "Was that a squeak?" he asked himself. And then he sniffed. "Ha!" he cried. "Do I smell a meadow mouse?" Rascal Coon was not mistaken. When he rustled the dried corn stalks, Master Meadow Mouse cried right out in his sleep, and he awakened just soon enough to hear Rascal Coon's remarks. "Maybe you do smell a meadow mouse," he replied under his breath. So Rascal Coon couldn't hear him. but it won't do you any good, for I'm not coming out of my castle until you go away." It soon appeared that Rascal Coon did not intend to leave, for Rascal began to pull at the cornstalks with his claws. Master Meadow Mouse covered inside his nest in the top of the shock of corn. The whole shock shook. There was a terrible rustle of dry leaves as Rascal Coon tore away stalk after stalk. "This fellow must be plump," he grunted, as he wrenched at a stubborn stalk with claws and teeth. "With all this corn to feast on, he ought to be just the right size to top off a good meal." For a few moments, Master Meadow Mouse wondered whether he ought to fight or run. He soon realized that he must act, and act quickly. "Maybe I'll bite his nose," he said to himself. "But I want to peep at him first." So Master Meadow Mouse left his nest and crept a short distance until he could peer out from between two cornstalks. In the moonlight, he had a fine view of Rascal Coon. And as he stared at the intruder, Meadow Mouse shuddered. "No," he exclaimed. "No, I never could fight him. I wouldn't dare bite his nose. He's far, far too big for me to tackle." There was no denying that Rascal Coon looked both huge and dangerous. Across his face was a black mask which only added to his horrid appearance. And through the mask, his greedy eyes shone right into the frightened ones of Master Meadow Mouse. One good look was enough for Master Meadow Mouse. He drew back hurriedly. Through his mind there flashed a saying of his mother's that he had not thought of for a long time. "He that runs away will live to fight another day." "I'll run," Master Meadow Mouse decided. "Then perhaps I will not have to fight at all." Then he stole out of the stalk of corn on the opposite side, and when Rascal Coon pawed his way through the nest, he found it empty. He gave a wail of dismay. "He's gone! The Meadow Mouse has gone!" Rascal bawled. "And I'll warrant he was a fat one, too. It's always the big ones that get away. And nobody can deny that this one was living high." So cute. I say that about all these stories. All right, let's do a short one. I will say I did quite well on that one. I'm getting better at not messing up when I read. That's exciting. Who would have thunk it? Catch a little rhyme. Once upon a time, I caught a little rhyme. I set it on the floor, but it ran right out the door. I chased it on my bicycle, but it melted to an icicle. I scooped it up in my hat, but it turned into a cat. I caught it by the tail, but it stretched into a whale. I followed it by boat, but it changed into a goat. When I fed it tin and paper, it became a tall skyscraper. Then it grew into a kite and flew far out of sight. We'll do this one. Mary Indoors by Illinois Farjian. Aren't you coming out, Mary? Come out, your eyes will tire. Oh, let me be. Please, please, said she. I want to read by the fire. What are you reading, Mary, that keeps you in? Oh, wonderful things of knights and kings, with their hearts' desire to win. Look out of the window, Mary. The blustering day is bright. Come fight the wind with us, and find the sun on the hilly height. Come on out of it, Mary, and win your heart's desire. Oh, let me please, please, she said. I want to read by the fire. I see a goat. Little talk. Don't you think it's probable that beetles, bugs, and bees talk about a lot of things? You know, such things as these. The kind of weather where they live in jungles tall with grass, and earthquakes in their villages whenever people pass. Of course, we'll never know if bugs talk very much at all, because our ears are far too big for talk that is so small. Okay. A boy's prayer. Give me clean hands, clean words, and clean thoughts. Help me to stand for the hard right against the easy wrong. Save me from the habits that harm. Teach me to work as hard and play as fair in thy sight alone, as if all the world saw. Forgive me when I am unkind, and help me to forgive those who are unkind to me. Keep me ready to help others at some cost to myself. Send me chances, do a little good every day, and so grow more like Christ. Okay, we're going to do one more story. Prince Ethan and the Stallions by Kayla Sanders. The sun shone that beautiful summer day, yet Prince Ethan glared across the valley at the bold flags of the neighboring kingdom. His neighbors, Prince Frederick and Prince James, were beloved by their people. Prince Frederick, the elder of the brothers, fought valiantly in battle and enforced justice as well as mercy. The younger brother, Prince James, encouraged the people through his kindness and could bring a smile to the most miserable person. Why did people love these good princes? I have just as much power and wealth as they do, Ethan grumbled to himself. What do they have that I don't? Then it hit him. Horses. Everyone knows that those good princes have stables filled with well-trained stallions, he thought. Ethan remembered hearing about the horses being fearless in the fiercest conflicts. He coveted the prize stallions and what they could offer him. Maybe I can find a way to smuggle the horses to my stables. I can claim them for my own, and then my people will admire me just as much as Frederick and James, he plotted. Smiling to himself, he hurried to inform his men. The journey to the prince's castle would be challenging on foot, but his envy convinced him that riding back on the stolen horses would be worth it. All his effort would earn him the admiration he desired. After a full day of traveling, Ethan's men arrived at Frederick and James's castle. Not long afterward, the good princes themselves appeared in the doorway of the stables. They must have just returned from a ride, Ethan thought. From the sound of their conversation, they had just come from visiting a widow and her children. It was good that they went, Prince Frederick said. The brothers walked past where Ethan's men hid in the forest surrounding the castle grounds. Yes, I think it was an encouragement to them. Prince James agreed with a smile. Prince Ethan clenched his teeth. Why did they have to be so good? The sun had set when the princes finally left the stables and went to supper. Prince Ethan gathered his craftiest men, and they darted between the trees until they reached the edge of the stables. They waited for the prince's signal. As soon as it was clear, Ethan hissed, "Keep quiet, move quickly, and get those stallions." The men crept under the fence that separated the stables from the field nearby. Working quietly in the dark, the men drove the stallions over the fence where more men were waiting. Nearly an hour later, his men gathered the last few horses. Prince Ethan leaned up against the oak tree, standing still as Prince Frederick peered out the castle window. When Frederick finally turned away, Ethan breathed. "Time to leave before I am discovered," he whispered to himself. Each of Ethan's men mounted his horse and led the stolen horses away in a herd. Ethan's shoulder tensed as he rode, expecting to hear the good prince's army galloping after them. But there wasn't a sound beyond the horses' hooves trotting through the open field. The thieves rode into the night and finally neared their kingdom by morning the next day. Prince Ethan relished in his victory. "I've done it. The horses are mine, and I've tricked Frederick and James. My people will surely admire me now," he thought with pride. He was lost in thought when he noticed the ring of soldiers surrounding them. Every soldier's sword was drawn. Then Ethan saw the good princes standing side by side. "Surrender immediately or prepare to fight," Prince Frederick commanded in steely tones. Ethan surrendered, knowing that he would lose if he fought the brothers. James bound him and his men with ropes, and they stumbled behind the horses back to the good prince's castle. One of the soldiers returned the horses to the stable, and the princes took the prisoners to the dungeon. "Don't try to escape tonight," Frederick warned Ethan. "Tomorrow we decide your punishment." As Frederick walked away, Ethan said, "I just wanted to be admired." James replied compassionately, "Admiration isn't a bad thing, Prince Ethan, but yesterday you sat in your castle, and because of jealousy, today you're sitting in a prison." That one was actually kind of hard because I didn't want to say princess, princesses, but it was cute. And then I'm going to show you a picture. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you are by now fast asleep. But if you're still with me, I just want to say that this is becoming something I've really, really enjoyed doing. And I hope you enjoy it too. I'll see you next time, very soon.